Hello and welcome back to Planet Nibiru, where anything is possible. This video brought to you by dial-a-plate.org, the automotive phone book. So today, we will be talking about the granddaddy of all quantum weirdness, the place where the Twilight Zone officially begins, the exact point at which reality departs from its normal bounds that make sense and delves off into the world of the wild, wacky, and unknown. That is where the infamous double-slit experiment lives. This strange point at which where all the things that we supposedly know as fact indeed cease to be facts and are once again relegated to the world of theory. But can one experiment really redefine science and reality as we know it? Can one little fact destroy so many other facts, effectively reducing them to little more than a probable outcome rather than holding them high as the scientific standards that they are supposed to be? To understand this experiment and its impact, we first need to see how it all works. Only then will you see why this will have such a mind-blowing effect on everything that you once took for granted. If I asked you the age-old question of the tree falling in the woods, how would you answer? I think most people would answer the same. I think most people would say yes, the tree would still make a sound even if there was no one around to hear it. This is traditional logic and thinking based on current scientific principles which we are taught since birth. But the double-slit experiment casts some serious doubt on that answer as well as many other things in this world that we now take for granted. Now, before we get too far into what this means, let's illustrate the experiment and show you why the tree may not make a sound if no one is around to hear it. Let's look at how this has been proven and that the mind of man can and does control matter. To understand the experiment, we must first understand matter. The world of matter is inanimate, just a lump of stuff with no knowledge of itself or life or time. A rock, a grain of sand, a mountain, or a spoon. In and of themselves, we see these things as lifeless things, with not a sliver nor a glimmer of self-awareness, nor any other awareness at all. They are made from matter, molecules clumped together in a way that gives them form and function, but not life. Even though a tree may be alive, we still do not view it as sentient, meaning we do not see it as self-aware. We do not believe that it understands that it is alive, and that there are other living things around it that it is interacting with. In the same way that a rock or a spoon is just a piece of matter, so are the tiniest particles of matter, the building blocks that make up the spoon or the stone, atoms, protons, electrons. All tiny pieces of matter that behave in the same lifeless and predictable way time and again. Because they are not alive. They cannot choose to act in any specific way. Scientists wanted to compare the similarities and differences in particles and waves. They wanted to understand how particles and waves reacted when tested under the same exact circumstances. But what they found was so powerful and groundbreaking that it redefined the world of quantum physics and is yet to be fully explained and integrated into current scientific theory. Basically, it's completely inexplicable, and as such, it's so far outside of our understanding that we cannot reconcile this information. And how is that for mind-blowing? We haven't even started yet. The experiment. So without any further ado, let's look at what all the hubbub is about. The experiment is comprised of the following elements: electrons, light waves, a photosensitive backdrop that is capable of measuring where and when the particles and waves hit it, and a blocking device that has a slit and a double slit. The experiment goes like this. When electrons, which are subatomic particles, are fired through a single slit, they are measured on the backdrop. These electrons act just like BBs. This measurement appears in the shape of a line, just like the slit itself. After so many BBs or electrons go through, it basically forms a line, mimicking the line or the slit in the blocker. The measurement appears in the shape of a line just like the slit itself, which is just as the scientists expected. Scientists assumes that the particles will act like little BBs or pellets and randomly form a line that looks like the line that they are shot through. This concept is very similar to using a stencil to paint. Like spray paint, the pellets or particles reproduce an image of the slit that they are fired through. When they fired the light waves through the slit, they were presented with a pattern made up of a series of lines. Because light waves continually multiply and cancel each other out in certain places while combining in other places and making some sections with greater light and some sections with no light at all. Now this was just as the scientists expected from light waves as well. They acted like waves. Now, when scientists added another slit to the blocker, they expected to see two lines that mimic the two slits from the electrons. However, this is not what happened. And this is where all the problems started. When the scientists fired the electrons through the double slit, they were presented with a pattern exactly like the one they saw from light waves. This perplexed the scientists. Why would the electrons act like light waves? They were shot separately and individually, yet they acted in a way that displayed the characteristics of light waves, canceling and merging with other waves. Since scientists know that single electrons do not act this way, and they could not understand how or why the electrons randomly started acting different. The experiment was repeated many times with the same result. To figure out how and why this was happening, the scientists decided to watch the particles and see which slit they were actually going through. At this point, things changed again. This time, a far more miraculous and significant transformation occurred though. The electrons now started to act like electrons again, replicating the two slits on the backdrop. The scientists were now worked up to a fever pitch. They knew they were breaking new ground, and the findings they were making were going to change the face of science forever. Or so they thought. So time and again, they set up this experiment and tested the theory, but time and again, they got the same result. When being observed, the particles acted appropriately and produced the expected outcome. When they took away the observing mechanism, the particles behaved as light waves should, creating this random pattern with many lines on it, proving that the matter was being affected merely by the act of being observed. Needless to say, this was a bit more than the scientists could handle. This not only proved that the field of quantum physics was in fact a bona fide science, but it also proved that many of the things that we took for granted were dead wrong. When they had run the experiment enough to satisfy themselves that the results were genuine, they brought their findings to the world of physics, and the rest is history. This experiment became the cornerstone of many other experiments and theories to follow. From here came the theories like the Copenhagen interpretation and thought experiments like Schrödinger's cat. All of these are attempts to understand the impossible. If matter could behave like this on its own merely by being observed by a human, then surely a great many other things were possible as well. The paranormal world now had to be viewed in a new light. Things like telekinesis, which were once thought to be fringe science, now had to be at the very least possible, if not probable. It was perhaps the first time that scientists had confronted themselves with their own facts and found no logical explanation. So what does it mean? When it's boiled down, distilled to its core, what is the end result? Well, this experiment proves a few things, but most importantly, it proves that matter behaves differently when observed by a human. It proves that we, in effect, control matter, even if it's on a very small scale. This of course opens the door to much greater things, but at its root, it proves that matter is inextricably linked to the human consciousness. To me, that is one of the most beautiful things imaginable. It's proof that humans are more than just the dominant species that randomly occurred in a long line of random occurrences. It proves that we are indeed special. It also raises questions, lots of questions really. If mankind can control matter, does that make us magical? Are we gods? Why can we control matter? How can we control matter? We know that matter is not sentient, so we know it is not acting differently because it's being observed. It has no will. It can't choose to act differently. It has no mind to understand a decision, much less make one. So we must be controlling it. And if we can control it, what are the limits? Will we one day be able to fully control matter and bend it to our will? Can we actually do this now, but it's being hidden from us? If reality is based on matter being a lifeless, mindless building block that can only be manipulated physically? Is reality even real? All of these are valid questions in light of the results of this experiment. We have to question literally everything that we think we know because of these results. Imagine the impact that this should be having on the world of science. Then ask yourself why science seems to ignore this experiment and the results. Is it merely because they don't have a rational explanation? Or perhaps it's something more nefarious than that. Maybe they are purposefully burying this fact. Imagine if we could learn to harness that power. Think of the possibilities. Think if you could reshape stone with your mind. If you could turn a car into a pumpkin. If you could condense the molecules in the air so you could walk on it. The list goes on forever. Manipulating matter would be one of the best and most useful superpowers a human could have. Think of Magneto from the X-Men and look at what he could do just being able to control metal. Now think if you could control everything or anything. Everything is made of matter and mass, and if you can control it, locked doors disappear, walls fade away. A can of trash becomes a can of cash. Now you tell me if the powers that be would want you to have that kind of power. Science should have been reshaped by this knowledge, yet nothing changed. This fact should have shaped the way that modern science is conducted. We should be spending millions and millions to find these answers and to answer these questions because the answers are worth incalculable trillions and more. Imagine a race of humans that could control mass. Scary in one aspect, but so beautiful in another. Shouldn't all children be taught that the human race is in fact special? That we are more than just the smartest animal on the planet? We can control matter. That is a godlike trait at the very least. We have a most special gift, and it's been proven to exist, and yet for some reason, nobody is researching how to harness that gift. All the years we spend attending school amount to nothing in the face of this one fact. Why was this never mentioned in science class? Is it a conspiracy? By definition, yes. Clearly and without a doubt, something being hidden by a group of people is technically a conspiracy. Is it being swept under the rug? Do some folks want this knowledge for themselves? And are they hiding it? Well, the cat is out of the box, so to speak. The real question now is, what will we do with this knowledge? Where do we go from here? What can we do? We can start by making sure that everyone in the world knows about the double-slit experiment. Not just knows about it, but understand what it means and all the implications of such. That would be a good start. Next, we should push for science to explore and define this phenomenon. If need be, we should start to come up with our own ideas on how to test the limits of this phenomenon. We cannot wait on the powers that be to do things for us. They won't. We have to organize and do for ourselves. We can start by pooling our ideas. So let me know your thoughts. Share them with the community. Get involved. Get in the comment section and let's hear what you think about this mind-blowing information. It's only by discussing these things that we will come to truly understand what they mean and how to best make use of them. Well, that's all for now. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and this information as much as I have. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment, and we'll see you in our next video. Tree would still make a sound even if there is no one around to hear it. This is traditional logic and thinking based on current scientific principles which we are taught since birth. But the double-slit experiment casts some serious doubt on that answer as well as many other things in this world that we now take for granted. Now, before we get too far into what this means, let's look at the automotive phone book. So today, we will be talking about the granddaddy of all quantum weirdness, the place where the Twilight Zone officially begins, the exact point at which reality departs from its normal bounds that make sense and delves off into the world of the wild, wacky, and unknown. That is where the infamous double-slit experiment lives. This strange point at which where all the things that we supposedly know as fact indeed cease to be facts and are once again relegated to the world of theory. But can one experiment really redefine science and reality as we know it? Can one little fact destroy so many other facts, effectively reducing them to little more than a probable outcome rather than holding them high as the scientific standards? Hello and welcome back to Planet Nibiru, where anything is possible. This video brought to you by double-slit that they are supposed to be. To understand this experiment and its impact, we first need to see how it all works. Only then will you see why this will have such a mind-blowing effect on everything that you once took for granted. If I asked you the age-old question of the tree falling in the woods, how would you answer? I think most people would answer the same. I think most people would say yes, the